one-day massacre in the history of the U.S., the McDonald's restaurant in San Ysidro is now a temporary morgue.
At first I was numb. Now I think about it. It's not something you forget.
McDonald's is our kind of place. It's such a happy place. Happy place. A clean and snappy place. McDonald's is our kind of place. It's such a happy place. McDonald's is our kind of place. Your kind of place.
McDonald's is definitely one of those places that doesn't really need an intro. A place people go to grab a quick, tasty bite to eat. Not everyone has the time or means to allocate towards making a home-cooked meal. On the other hand, not everyone wants to eat food and not know where it comes from. All about that farm to table. Many Americans go fishing or head to the woods or forest to do some hunting for tonight's dinner. And for others, McDonald's is their preferred hunting spot. To hunt for humans, which is one of the last things 41-year-old James Huberty said to his wife before being the orchestrator of the deadliest massacre in U.S. history by a lone gunman on July 18th, 1984. But before we unwrap this, make sure to leave a like and subscribe down below, which helps the channel a ton in making more content like this to bring awareness. Society had their chance. James Huberty was a resident of San Diego, California. Beautiful beaches, serene sunsets, and exotic zoos. As we've said before, James had a wife, but he also had 2 children, who we'll talk about more a little later on. We first need to go back and try to understand how this man, who had an entire family, a home, and a job to support all of that, got to this point. James Oliver Huberty, born October 11th, 1942 in Canton, Ohio, was the younger sibling of 2, having an older sister. Both parents were very religious and regularly attended United Methodist churches. Early on in life, James went through a lot. When he was around 3, he contracted polio. For those unfamiliar, polio is an infectious disease caused by a virus that can spread from person to person and cause paralysis. Around the time of 1945-1946, polio was a rampant issue. Today, it's rare due to preventative vaccines, but effective and safe vaccines were not administered to the public until April 1955, so James missed that by just a decade. Nonetheless, he was advised to wear braces on both legs. He made a remarkable recovery, but would have his movement hindered with a mild limp for the rest of his life. James also endured some other hardships that maybe you yourself or someone close to you has experienced. Mom and dad splitting up. When James was 7, his father purchased a farm in Mount Eaton, Ohio. There is a stark contrast in those living environments. Canton, Ohio was more in the city, while Mount Eaton was more rural. His mother despised the idea of this and refused to live in a rural area, let alone take a look at the property. She preferred the industrial area and didn't want to live her life out in the middle of nowhere. As you might have guessed, this plays a role in the 2 splitting up. And, as you also might have guessed, especially if you've been there, James was heartbroken by his mother abandoning the family. At their new farm, his father would find him slumped down by the chicken coop, just crying and sobbing. And now, I don't want to say this next part was a red flag because it can be a seemingly harmless hobby, and at this point, I don't think anyone would have immediately suspected anything weird. I'm also not trying to imply that James himself even had ill intent regarding this hobby. James was rather a loner and outcast in school. He didn't have many friends and kept to himself. He was average in his studies and was often bullied due to his limp, lack of friends, and his family's extreme religious beliefs. At the very least, others believed them to be extreme. This hobby would definitely raise eyebrows in this day and age, but again, I have no idea how society would have perceived this back in the 1950s. Gunsmithing. In hindsight, it kind of comes off as obvious or stereotypical. The quiet loner in the back of the classroom who has a strong interest in guns. I'm not sure if other peers and classmates were aware of this, but if they were anything like high schoolers are today, then this would 100% add on to the bullying. Nothing odd or anything happened while in primary schooling, and he graduated pretty unremarkably. The story just kinda keeps writing itself. In 1962, James enrolled at Malone University, which is a Christian university in Canton, Ohio. While attending, he met and married his wife, Etna Markland. Following this, James began working locally at a funeral home. Through this position, he got into direct contact with the bodies of the deceased. Some of his tasks involved embalming, which, if you don't know, for funeral homes, the goal primarily consists of sanitization, presentation, and preservation. As we know, James kept to himself, and this was seen throughout his life. This position of working in a funeral home was people-facing, which made working there difficult, even though he was seen as a good and hard worker. He later found a different job as a welder, which better suited his more hard-work personality and paid very well for the time. He and his wife Etna ended up getting a house in Massacre, Ohio. Tragically, their home burned down in the winter of 1971, though I found nothing regarding the cause of it. They bought another house on the same street and used the land of the house that burned down to turn into a 6-unit apartment building, which they managed. Now, this entire video is a sensitive topic, but I felt as though I should give a heads up that this next section may be a little more graphic. I'm not going to be showing anything graphic for obvious reasons, but I am beginning the section where things start getting disturbing. So if you would rather watch another one of my videos, click here. And if you've made it this far and want to keep watching, then stay tuned. James and Etna had 2 daughters 2 years apart, Zelia being the older sister and Cassandra being the younger. James actually had a history of domestic violence. He would often slap his daughters, which some may try to excuse as a disciplinary technique. However, the slapping also included punching, and he beat on his own wife Etna. James would even hold knives to the throats of his daughters. This physical and psychological abuse would persist, and Etna even attempted to get into touch with the Canton Department of Children and Family Services, informing them of her messed up jaw and other matters. In 1976, Etna would try to convince James to seek counseling. He refused time and time again, rejecting any form of therapy. So she attempted other measures to try and relax James. He had a bad temper, anxiety, and paranoia. To soothe him, she began to read his fortune by utilizing tarot card readings. This surprisingly worked for James, albeit temporarily, and he would follow Etna's recommendations from the readings. Some details are a little muddy. It's difficult to ascertain if some are true or made up for the sake of people saying, "Oh yeah, the signs were there all along." Regardless, some sources are mentioning that James had a few altercations involving a neighbor and a dog. One of these interactions was when a neighbor complained to James about damage to his car. Supposedly, James's dog left visible damage to the neighbor's car, and to reprimand his dog for the bad behavior, he got his dog and shot the dog in the head. I don't know about you all, but I feel like this is a really serious matter and crime that seems to be ignored from a lot of different news articles I've reviewed. I can't find much else regarding this, or who reported it, or anything. Another source claims James kept an arsenal of weapons to threaten his neighbors and owned 2 vicious dogs which he let run free and once threatened to shoot everyone. This seems to somewhat contradict the last scenario. Why would he shoot one of his dogs if he lets them do whatever anyway, and even threatens his neighbors with his own guns? Then again, we know what this man's capable of from the title of this video, or if you're already familiar with this tragedy. He doesn't seem to be the most rational person either way, but regardless, I cannot find solid, reliable sources backing these claims. And another source claims it was an air gun. An officer was called to their home on numerous occasions due to noise complaints from their dogs. However, as of 1980, James was only arrested once, and that was for drunk and disorderly conduct at a service station. It shocked me that anybody that knowledgeable would do that. James was also in a motorcycle accident, and if you remember earlier when we talked about his upbringing and experiences as a child, James was diagnosed with polio. This incident, along with polio, led to him having extreme difficulties controlling his arm, to the point it made welding strenuous because it was that much of a hindrance. However, while working there, he did end up making an acquaintance, and potentially even a friend, if you want to call it that. This man was also named James Slains, so for obvious reasons I'll refer to them by their family name to avoid confusion. The Slains became friendly with James at work when he was first getting to know him. Through conversation, James seemed particularly interested in the fact that Slains was training and studying Kung Fu. He wanted his own daughters to learn as well, so they would know how to defend themselves. The two welder friends began visiting each other's houses, as they also had a shared interest in guns. However, the Slains would soon begin to grow wary of him. When visiting James's home, he saw guns everywhere. Handguns, shotguns, rifles, and a semi-automatic Israeli-made Uzi. But at this point, the Slains was not immediately concerned. They both loved guns. It's a big reason why they visited each other's homes. But what really turned the Slains' head on an angle was when they went shooting and what he decided to shoot. James shot at a rock. To some, this may mean nothing, and you may be thinking, what's the big deal? Shooting at something with such hardness and density could cause the bullet to ricochet, with the irregular shapes of rocks making the trajectory unpredictable. Meaning, he was concerned that James would accidentally shoot one of them. We know James had a long history and extensive experience with firearms, and he knew this too. He thought, how could someone, why would someone this knowledgeable be so careless? It showed immense disregard for gun safety and the well-being of others. He thought, this man is dangerous. Cut off their fingers, cut off their hands, and tie them up by their testicles. Another coworker James had when he worked at this welding company also had some concerns about him. They claimed if he heard word about anyone recently purchasing a gun, that he would try to buy it off of them. This strikes me as odd. If someone just bought something, why would you offer to buy it off of them? Why not just buy it from the same place they got it from, or even a different place? As we know, this man already has guns all over his house, and he keeps them in every corner, loaded and ready. This behavior may indicate a strong sign of addiction or obsession with firearms. Going back to the other coworker, the Slains, he also mentioned James saying disturbing things and described his imagination as being morbid. He would talk about rapists, the Slains said. He mentioned what should be done with them, that they should cut off their fingers, they should cut off their hands, and tie them up by their testicles. Things like that frightened me. I believe it frightened him because there's just some dude at work who obviously lacks any concept of gun safety and treats them as mere toys, talking about mutilating people. Obviously these people are horrible people, but is it really about getting justice, or is it more about discussing and fulfilling your own grotesque desires in a way that is deemed socially acceptable, because rapists are disgusting creatures anyway? As we know, he is very religious, even in a way that others who practice that same religion would find him to be misled and off-putting. Perhaps this is a display of some skewed sense of justice. James was laid off in November of 1982, which for many Americans is a month of Thanksgiving, and for much of the world, the month prior to Christmas and winter, meaning money generally is very important at this time. He grew concerned about making house payments and meeting deadlines for other miscellaneous bills on top of this. Now, we know James is a prime offender in this entire ordeal, no doubt about that. Still, I find it important to discuss more of that dynamic at home. Edna was also capable of some pretty malicious things as well, or at the very least, her actions definitely raised some eyebrows. Allegedly, the Hubertys attended a birthday party for their neighbor's daughter. Many details are lost in this interaction, and it's another case of weak sources. Nonetheless, something prompted Edna to tell her daughter, Celia, who was 10 at the time, to physically assault one of her classmates. And something that takes this even further is that Edna later threatened this classmate's mom with a 9mm. Edna did end up getting arrested for this altercation, but police would have reportedly failed to confiscate the firearm in question. I can't even begin to imagine what would bring it to this. I mean, this was a child's birthday party. There just seemed to be a lot of incidents involving guns with the Hubertys. Sleep is important. I'm sure most people would agree with that. Edna was having some difficulty sleeping. Allegedly, the neighbors were making quite the upstir when she was trying to catch some Z's. What would you do in this case? Well, Edna, in this scenario, went up to the pesky neighbors in an attempt to quell their noise. Except, just like during the birthday party, she threatened the neighbors with a handgun. And, again, like the birthday party, police were involved and she was charged. The environment at home had to have been nothing short of stressful, paranoia-filled, and miserable. Maybe times were not always like this, but no one can deny this did not play a huge role in their lives. There was so much reported and alleged abuse, both physical and emotional. We know Edna has attempted to persuade James to seek therapy. Maybe things would have played out differently in the end. No one knows. You should have let me shoot myself. Back to James getting laid off from his job. Early in the following year, it all began to get to him. James was in a dark place. He couldn't take care of his family the way he wanted. He was withdrawn, depressed, and started to hear voices. He threatened to commit suicide and went as far as actually drawing a loaded pistol against his own temple. His wife Edna dissuaded him from taking this drastic measure, but he ended up telling her later on that she should have just let him do it. James was unable to find employment, and they ended up having to sell their 6-unit apartment building for $115,000 in the spring of 1983 just to make ends meet. James had the brilliant idea of moving to Mexico because he thought it would be easier with a lower cost of living. They sold their house for some extra cash and ended up moving to Tijuana in October of that year. They left many things behind in storage, but made sure to have an ample supply of guns and ammunition. The tremors and pain from his polio continued to worsen, as did their financial situation, as James was still struggling to find employment. But within a few months, they were back in the States. However, it wasn't too far from Mexico, as they moved to San Ysidro, which is in California and borders Tijuana. James also exhibited some discomfort due to his family being the only white people in the apartment complex. And if you've been following along, you know James is perceived as rude to say the least, so he made his discomfort known to his neighbors. He ultimately was able to find a job as a security guard after training, and his family moved to a different complex. But this guy just cannot seem to hold a job. On July 10th, he was fired, as his employers thought he had terrible performance at work and exhibited physical instability, which is pretty essential in being a security guard. Yesterday was the worst day of my life. I feel so sorry for those people. 5 days after getting fired, James reflected on himself and acknowledged that he may have some mental health issues. He talked to Edna about this and ended up setting an appointment with the San Diego mental health clinic 2 days later. He was finally trying to straighten himself out and dissect some of those lifelong issues and trauma, and told the receptionist that he had never been hospitalized in the past. He made this call on July 17th and was told he would receive a call back in a few hours. A few hours go by, nothing. A few more, still nothing. He waited by the phone for hours and hours before finally just leaving the house abruptly and taking a ride on his motorcycle. James came back an hour later. He seemed much more relaxed, so he might have just needed a scenic drive and some time alone. He got back, ate dinner with Edna, Cassandra, and Zelia, and the family all cycled to a nearby park after, just enjoying time together, enjoying the weather, and being there as a family. When they got back, James and Edna watched a movie together before heading to bed. The next morning, the family headed to the San Diego Zoo. They walked around, looked at all the different animals and exhibits, before James said something rather disturbing to Edna. He told her that his life was basically over, before saying, well, society had their chance. This was in reference to the clinic not returning his call. They then headed to McDonald's in Claremont, San Diego for lunch before returning home. Some time passed and Edna was relaxing on their bed. James came in, decked in camo, leaned over and told Edna, I want to kiss you goodbye." Edna questioned where he planned to go, as she intended to make dinner pretty soon. He was holding a gun across his shoulder and carrying a box of ammunition and a bundle wrapped in a blanket. He told her he was going hunting for humans. While walking towards the front door, James turned to their daughter, Zelia, with the words, "Goodbye, I won't be back," leaving his lips. If there is one thing to be said about James, it's that at this moment, he was being completely honest. Upon exiting his family home for the last time, he drove to a supermarket and then to the post office before entering the parking lot of a McDonald's. This McDonald's was only 180 meters from their home.
You're going, you're grooving, you got to keep moving. Can't hold your back, you got it bad, you're on the go.
You're on the go, 'cause you know that you've got to show. You keep it moving, 'cause you just can't take it slow.
Everybody on the ground. This is one of many McDonald's commercials that aired the same year of this incident. It was the afternoon turned evening, and James was thoroughly equipped with weapons to ruin the lives of innocents. As he entered McDonald's, he locked sights on a teenager working the restaurant. He reined his shotgun and aimed it at the 16-year-old. The assistant manager shouted to the teenage worker that this man was about to shoot him. He proceeded to pull the trigger when nothing happened. Something was wrong with it, so he checked the gun to see the issue. They then thought this was some sort of joke. Fast food workers deal with a lot of BS, so it can be somewhat understandable they thought this. A guy walks in, aims a gun, and it doesn't even do anything. Also, given the year this occurred, 1984, these things did not happen as often as they do today in America, and this just simply is not something you ever want to think would truly be happening. The manager walks to the counter with the assistant manager, and as the assistant manager turns their back and steps away, James is able to fire the gun and shoots the ceiling. Immediately after, he switches to his Uzi and shoots a single bullet under the manager's eye. The manager's name was Neva Kane, and devastatingly, this shot was fatal. Right after, he switches his target back to the teenager named John Arnold. He shot at his chest and his arm, but John manages to survive. As he falls to the floor, James shouts, "Everybody on the ground." This was all real. This was all happening. A customer in their 20s named Victor Rivera tries to tell James to stop, to not shoot anymore, to not hurt any more innocent people. James was already too far gone. He shot Victor 14 times while repeatedly telling him to shut up. James killed more. He killed men and women and children, just taking out all his hate and anger on these innocent souls. He called them dirty swine, Vietnam assholes, and he told everyone in the store that he had killed 1,000 and would kill 1,000 more. When the calls to authorities began, the dispatcher unfortunately misdirected police to a different McDonald's nearby. Nonetheless, officers made it to the scene around 10 minutes from the initial call. They placed the area on lockdown and were joined by SWAT. The situation was undoubtedly dire, and authorities needed to make sure they could keep everyone safe. About an hour later, all units were given the order to kill the perpetrator on sight. If all of this wasn't sickening enough, survivors reported that James would turn on some radio to listen in on his own crime in progress.
Make sure you approach from the south, and the CP is at 300 west. The shooting suspect is inside the McDonald's. He is contained, moving around in there, still shots being fired.
He then proceeded to turn on music and dance as he shot more innocents. There were still many victims in the restaurant hiding from this mass murderer. James knew this and spouted, "Oh, there's more. You're trying to hide from me, you bastards," and shot at people who pleaded for him not to kill them. He even threw fries at some people before shooting them and shot at a fire truck that drove near the scene. There was a SWAT sniper waiting for an opportune moment atop a post office nearby. They had their sights on the McDonald's, and more importantly, James. As James made his way to the exit of the McDonald's, the sniper took his chance to fire a round straight through the gunman. Due to the sheer amount of damage in the area, the amount of rounds fired, and most importantly, the amount of people injured, They were unsure if this was the only suspect. This all lasted over an hour. James wounded many people and killed 21, inside and outside of McDonald's. Only 10 victims in the restaurant were unharmed, and only by quick thinking or a stroke of luck, as a handful of them were hidden in the basement. These victims ranged from 74 years to 4 months, before having their lives cut short by someone who even stated that they themselves did not deserve to live. The victims were primarily Mexican or Mexican American, although not all of them were. This is reflective of the demographics of the location.
The gunman has been identified as 41-year-old James Huberty of San Ysidro, an unemployed security guard. Police say his wife was brought to the scene to try to talk him out of the building, but was unsuccessful.
77 minutes, an hour and a quarter passed. The day following the incident, reporters visited James's father's house and asked his father, Earl Huberty, questions about James's life. He says, "Yesterday was the worst day of my life. I feel so sorry for those people." McDonald's would temporarily suspend advertisements following the event, and other fast food establishments like Burger King followed suit in solidarity. His wife and daughters received numerous death threats. They attended counseling sessions for months, had to move around, change schools, and even had to take on assumed names to avoid rejection and harassment. According to a newspaper article published on July 18, 1984, in the Kentucky New Era, local funeral homes had used the San Ysidro Civic Center to hold wakes for each victim. The local church was forced to hold back-to-back funeral masses. As stated prior, the victims were primarily Mexican or Mexican American. San Diego Police Chief William Collender held a press conference. He dismissed the idea of it being a hate crime or racially motivated and said he didn't like anybody. Earlier we discussed James's job issues, and some people have stated that he blamed the Mexican immigrants for not being able to find a job. So this definitely does seem like a motive. Even his own wife said he hated immigrants. In any case, preventative measures included more rigorous training for armed personnel. Within only 2 days, the restaurant was renovated and refurbished. They hoped it would be seen as just another McDonald's over time. However, community leaders and McDonald's executives decided it should not reopen.
News came that the McDonald's restaurant would reopen. That hit neighbor Gloria Salas hard, and she began a crusade. Salas and friends eventually gathering more than 10,000 signatures demanding the restaurant be closed.
It's rather impudent to even consider it, knowing all of this, and the fact that locals will still see and drive past this McDonald's. That's nothing short of disrespectful to the people lost or the families and friends impacted. It needs to be turned into something tranquil and sincere, like a park or memorial. About 4 years later, that's exactly what they did. Southwest College purchased the land with the agreement that an area in front of the campus be set aside as a permanent memorial to the 21 victims.
Yeah, Eric and Netta, that ceremony started about 30 minutes ago. It's still underway, and it's taking place at the Southwestern College Higher Education Center here on San Ysidro Boulevard. This is actually the location of where that McDonald's used to stand. And now in its place, of course, is the Higher Education Center, as well as this memorial, which, as you can see, shows the pictures of the 21 victims. This is a permanent memorial, and we've seen people throughout the morning come by to watch, take pictures, just take a moment to remember these 21 victims. So if you'd like to pay your respects today, this, of course, is always here.
McDonald's later constructed another restaurant not far from the original, about 300 meters away from it. However, the restaurant chain also announced a commitment to donate $1 million to a survivors fund, with Joan Kroc, the widow of McDonald's founder Ray Kroc, also adding a personal contribution of $100,000 to assist with burial costs, financial aid for relatives of the deceased, and counseling for survivors. The fund received over $1.4 million. Amidst impromptu protests from some San Ysidro residents and donors, Edna Huberty received the first payout from this fund. The IRS also wanted a piece of that money. We know about James's upbringing, his childhood, work, social life, and we have an understanding of the events that occurred leading up to the massacre. After everything, Edna attempted to sue McDonald's for $5 million in a wrongful death lawsuit, and claimed that the poor nutrition and food additives at McDonald's played a key role in this tragedy. She claimed it affected his mental health leading to this event. Part of me will remember him as a very nice person, loving, gentle, and kind. Another part will remember him as a violent person. At just 12 years old, Zelia knew something was wrong with her father. Despite being able to understand he was mentally ill, she still missed him. The widowed Edna even thought to herself that she figured there was a possibility of him killing her one day, as he even pointed a gun at her as well as Zelia on another occasion. The same gun used on that day.
I think everybody thinks this couldn't happen to them. It's like something you would see on TV that's far away from you, totally removed. But it happened, and it involves me. And like I said, a lot of people think, hey, it couldn't happen to me. I disagree. I think it could.
Despite this, Edna claims he never mistreated the girls. Zelia saw him before he left as well, but just figured he was going to the hills to shoot to distress like he always does. Sadly, he took that out on the world, and she also saw the pain he inflicted on it. Zelia has had some thoughts. What if I turn out like that? But from what I could find, she's the opposite in many ways. She became a nurse, helping people, which also helped herself mentally. One thing many people may be wondering is if the mental health clinic would have helped James and prevented this tragedy altogether. If you recall from earlier, James spent hours waiting for a call he never received. The reason he didn't get a call back was due to an error. This day is not at all the fault of the clinic. However, the receptionist got the wrong info and marked the call as a non-crisis. Edna died of breast cancer at 60 years old in 2003. Albert Vitella, a community service officer, reminisces on the what-ifs. What if he had done something different? He knew Omar and Joshua, two boys who were at the McDonald's meeting up with friends. Albert became an officer to help people, but thinks the slogan, protect and serve, was not reflective of the force's actions that day. That there was so much more they could have done.
One was high school student Albert Leos.
How many times were you shot?
4.
What are you angriest about?
Well, I just wish I wouldn't have been there at the time. That's but there was nothing we could do about it, because it could have happened anywhere.
11-year-old Josh Coleman was coming up the driveway with two friends.
As you were going toward McDonald's, did you have any idea something was happening there?
No.
Did anyone yell at you or something?
Yeah, from across the street, a man yelled at us.
What'd you think?
I didn't understand what he was saying.
Yeah. Where were you hit?
All on my arm, and on my back, and right here.
When did you realize that your friends were dead?
My mom told me in the hospital.
What happened to your friends?
They died.
All 5?
No, 3 of them. 3 girls.
When nobody came to help you, what did you think about doing next?
Just laying there and wait.
And most people talked about trying to play dead so he wouldn't know that they were still alive and shoot at him.
Did you think of that by yourself?
Mm-hmm.
How come?
I don't know.
It's pretty smart.
Joshua survived them out of the friend group. Adelina Hernandez lost her son Omar Hernandez at just 11 years old. She explains how she used to look at the world so fondly, but the events have left a deep emptiness inside of her. She explains she's become colder and harder, but at the same time, because of him, she aspires to be a better person. Working at the elementary school that Omar attended has been therapeutic for her. Maria Flores is one of many who have lost a loved one to this tragedy as well. She shares a harsh fear and reality delivered with a heavy heart. What if people keep trying to break these records and see it as just a number, and acknowledges it continues to happen? She lost her son David Flores, also 11, and as you may have guessed, he was also a part of that friend group. They plan to all meet there to get some ice cream together. He's always in her heart and mind. These families and loved ones appreciate the memorial and people coming to share respects and honor these souls. Maria and Adeline are close friends who feel as though they are to blame for this. From their interviews with news reporters, it's clear both boys were really into the arts. They were passionate and good at it, with David just recently winning Best Drawing in school and Omar being cast as a star and director in a play. Looking back, the mothers see this as a heartbreaking waste of life, all because of one psychopath.
Newspaper coverage hold frozen moments from what was at that time the worst mass shooting in American history. Outside, in front of the building, the permanent memorial. A plaque anchors a monument featuring 21 hexagonal pillars, one for every one of the victims who were killed.
One afternoon, we all had a shared experience. We came face to face with how vulnerable we really are. Again, if you found this to be interesting or informative, please drop a like and subscribe so that I may continue making documentaries like these. It truly helps out a ton. I would love to know if there are any details I may have missed, and if you have come across or know someone affected by this, please share those thoughts below. Wherever you are in life right now, keep pushing forward. You've made it this far, even if it's just a little at a time. Thank you all for watching. Stay safe and keep it real.